Comment, like, subscribe. The bell keeps you notified. It helps the show thrive. I love professional wrestling. If you've been watching my videos for long enough or follow me on any social media, this is something you probably know about myself already. I imagine, however, not everyone watching this video loves watching big sweaty men and women fighting as much as I do, so thank you for checking out this video if you know next to nothing about wrestling. My aim is to make this video an introduction of sorts and make it as accessible to non-fans as possible. Let me know how I did at the end. I spend a large amount of my time trying to explain what exactly pro wrestling is to others, as it perfectly balances that fine line between a form of sports and an entertainment medium, hence why it's also known as sports entertainment. The closest parallel I have found to pro wrestling is a sport like synchronized swimming or a gymnastics routine. These are sports that are scored on the actual performance and movement of the performers, as opposed to goals or anything like that. Wrestling is somewhat like this. While it might just seem like a fight, people really into wrestling are more judging the moves and the storytelling as opposed to just who wins. But we all still have our favourites who we want to succeed and guys we want to see punched in the face. That's the entertainment aspect of it. That really isn't the best analogy, but honestly, pro wrestling is such a unique thing that it's pretty hard to compare to anything else. Just go watch WrestleMania 17 or Wrestle Kingdom 11 or something. Another way pro wrestling is unique is with the array of language, words and names used within the medium, and some of it is absolutely bizarre. Like many niches, wrestling too has its own vocabulary and lexicon. This includes using words we all know of in a distinct way to completely unique words coined for the squared circle. Squared circle being, by the way, one of those terms, though I think other combat sports use it too. It's a term for the wrestling ring. Squared because it's square in shape, and circle because it's called a ring, which are usually in the shape of a circle, hence squared circle. While squared circle makes a degree of sense when explained, others are a bit more weird. Take the sentence, "In kayfabe, that heel just turned face." To someone who doesn't watch wrestling, I imagine that sentence made no sense at all. Yet if you're a fan, that was absolutely clear. In non-wrestling terms, I just said, in the fictional universe of pro wrestling, that bad character became a good guy. And let me explain how exactly that came to be, starting with kayfabe. This is a word incredibly ubiquitous with pro wrestling, and it means what is going on in the fictional world of that pro wrestling promotion. In example, take the wrestlers of Kane and The Undertaker. In real life, they aren't related, but in the universe of WWE, the promotion they work for, they are brothers, meaning they are kayfabe brothers. As to where kayfabe comes from, we don't seem to be exactly sure. The popular idea is that's the corruption of the Pig Latin form of fake. Fake in Pig Latin would be something like igfe, so you can see how that became kayfabe. Heel and face are two terms that go hand in hand in pro wrestling too. Heel simply means a bad character and face means a good character. We aren't sure exactly where they come from, however, but face for good guys is a shortening of babyface and is sometimes shortened to just baby. Kayfabe, heel and face might just be the three most well known of wrestling words, but they're far from the only ones. You can find whole glossaries of wrestling terms online to go check out yourself. The best of these glossaries I have found, however, has to be the one in Jim Smallman's book, I'm Sorry, I Love You, A History of Professional Wrestling. In fact, this is probably the best pro wrestling book hands down. Go read it if you want to understand more about the sport. I won't rattle off every wrestling term here, but here are a selection of my favourites. Card is a word for the various matches on a show for the night. The biggest match, featuring the two most well-known wrestlers, will often be referred to as being on the top of the card, with other matches being the undercard. These terms are also heard in sports like boxing too. Gimmick is a word used in wrestling to explain a wrestler's unique character. For example, Sergeant Slaughter's gimmick was that he was a wrestling army sergeant. Gimmick can also extend to types of matches too. There can be gimmick matches like a ladder match or a buried alive match, which are both pretty self-explanatory. Heat is a word for a negative reaction a wrestler gets. There are many kinds of heat, however. Good heat is when a wrestler who is portraying a bad guy aka a heel, gets booed by the audience, that means they're doing a good job. Backstage heat means that the wrestler has a real life negative reception backstage with other wrestlers. And then there's even go away heat, where a wrestler is so disliked by the fans they just want them to go away, regardless of if they're a face or heel. A fan of wrestling is called a mark, especially fans who go along with whatever the wrestlers are doing, e.g. cheering the face or booing the heels. A smark, however, a compound of smart and mark, is a fan who is a bit more savvy to the industry. They're the kind of fans who use this terminology. A squash is when one wrestler gets completely destroyed by another, and usually those getting squashed are called jobbers, wrestlers who normally serve the purpose of getting beaten up to make someone else look good. While this might sound a bit strange, in wrestling there's actually a lot of pride in being a good jobber. No-sold is a term used when a wrestler doesn't react to something in the way they should do, e.g. they got kicked in the head but don't fall over. And then tweener is used to refer to a wrestler who isn't quite a traditional good guy or traditional bad guy. As I said, that's just a small selection of wrestling terminology, but hopefully now you should have a clear understanding of all these things. Like if I were to say that face will have major backstage heat because he broke kayfabe by no-selling that move, you should hopefully be able to make a little bit more sense of it. To wrestling fans, however, this vocabulary is so commonplace that it could end up seeping into other non-wrestling conversations. Well, it has for myself at least anyway. I've referred to characters turning heel in other movies and shows when they go bad, and even use the term no-sold when someone doesn't laugh at a joke. It's very niche language, but when you get to understand it, it can become very versatile and used in a variety of situations. On top of all this, wrestling fans have to remember the names of their favorite wrestlers too. I'm not talking about their real names either. I'm talking about the names they use in the ring. Their kayfabe names. Names are incredibly important in pro wrestling, and how wrestlers end up with their names happen in a huge variety of ways. What Culture Wrestling have a video about wrestler name origins, and Cultaholic have a video about wrestlers who have better real names than kayfabe ones. Go check those out if you must. Some wrestlers do simply use their real names, John Cena being a prime example of that. Other wrestlers adapt parts of their first or last name, like how Bill Goldberg is known as just Goldberg. Same for Dave Bautista being known as just Batista. Becky Lynch used the shortened form of her real first name of Rebecca and changed her last name from Quinn to Lynch. A really fun one is with the wrestler who is really called Bryan Danielson, who in the past has gone under the ring name of Daniel Bryan, which is his real name just flipped around and changed a little. Some wrestlers take on a regular human-like sounding name that is nothing like their real name, however, like Phil Brooks becoming CM Punk, Colby Lopez becoming Seth Rollins, or Mercedes Venado becoming Sasha Banks, though others take on more ambiguous names like The Undertaker, Goldust, and perhaps most well known, The Rock. There's one main reason as to why wrestlers tend to take on new names, and that's to help build their character. Someone with a name like The Undertaker is obviously going to be a grave-digging spooky character, but some are a tad more subtle. Having a surname like Banks has connotations of wealth and money, and those are traits seen in Sasha Banks' character. Likewise, a man with the name Punk implies they are a rule breaker and anti-authority, which CM Punk very much does embody. Sometimes the names of wrestlers get immortalized into wrestling terminology too. The Gorilla position is named after Gorilla Monsoon, and is the name of the location just behind the entry ramp. A Dusty Finish is named after the wrestler Dusty Rhodes, and it's when a match does not have a definitive ending. And X-Pac Heat is another name for Go Away Heat, named after the wrestler X-Pac. Luckily now, however, most seem to appreciate his work. Lots of wrestlers seem to have quite a complex relationship with their real and kayfabe names, it would seem. A while back on a series I might one day bring back called Name Talk, I did an interview with wrestler Shazza McKenzie, and she explained to me how very few people referred to her by her real name, instead calling her kayfabe name of Shazza in and out of the ring. Some wrestlers seem to even see their ring name as a completely different person. Richard Flair is more well known by his kayfabe name of Ric Flair, and he sees Flair and Flair as two different people. James Ellsworth wrestled under the name The Ultimate Warrior and grew so attached to it that in his later years he legally changed his name to just Warrior. It's an occupation that can become all-consuming for some. Many find it hard to figure out where one name ends and another begins. This is especially the case in the past before the World Wide Web. Back then, knowing a wrestler's real name was a pretty big deal, and now that information is much more easily accessed. Names, words, and language in pro wrestling are at their most bizarre, however, when it comes to the pro wrestling run by Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Vince McMahon is the head of creative and CEO of WWE, the largest pro wrestling promotion on earth. He's pretty well known outside of wrestling too. He's the guy getting excited in the meme. For all intents and purposes, he pretty much is pro wrestling for so many people. Of course, there are different promotions, but to most people, his promotion of WWE is the be-all and end-all in wrestling. Vince is a very particular person, putting it plainly. He believes that wrestling should take one specific form, which includes a very specific style of language and certain words that should and should not be used. This has resulted in many words being banned from use during his shows. Many of the words banned by Vince McMahon include those terms I mentioned up top, terms like heel, face, kayfabe, and so on. It actually makes sense as to why these words are banned. These are very much behind the scenes words and don't really have any place in the show itself. It would break immersion if they were heard. It would be like if Iron Man called Thanos the main antagonist during Avengers Endgame. Just a bit odd. However, there are other words Vince doesn't like being used on his show too, and these are a lot more bizarre. It's worth noting that a lot of this comes from a supposedly leaked document given out to WWE commentary, but others have gone on record saying it's true, and just watching the show you can see it too. For example, title belts can't be called belts or straps, they have to be called championships. Hospitals can't be called hospitals, they have to be called medical centers. Chances to win championships can't be called title shots, they instead have to be called championship opportunities. Though the weirdest of them all, and I'm not making this up, is that in WWE, the most popular wrestling promotion on the planet, wrestlers are not allowed to be called wrestlers. And the word wrestling itself isn't allowed to be used either. Instead, they're called superstars. This is absolutely nuts. Imagine if NFL or Premier League commentators weren't allowed to say football. Yet this is the norm in WWE and something everyone just accepts. Why? Well, here's why. At least my own theory, however. Vince seems to understand that wrestling is a bit of a niche, and to get as many people to watch wrestling as possible, he has to kind of distance wrestling from, well, wrestling. This is by emphasizing more on the spectacle and the characters rather than what goes on in the ring, and in turn using less wrestling specific language. This angers many fans, that's for sure. But luckily there's some really great alternatives out there. There's also some terrific in-ring work going on in WWE too, of course. Go watch Cena vs Styles at SummerSlam 2016, one of the best recent matches in WWE history. And of course, Vince is often bizarre when it comes to the names of wrestlers too. When wrestlers come to WWE, they often get a new name. This can be for legal reasons or to just give them a fresh start. That's kind of fine. I mean, it's annoying when your favorite wrestler gets a new name, but you get used to it. What's really bizarre, however, is when wrestlers get random new names during their time in WWE. Many wrestlers have lost their names, such as Matt Riddle becoming just Riddle and Big E Langston becoming just a Big E. Some get completely new names, however, with little explanation. The German wrestler of Volta had his name randomly changed to Gunther, and just recently, as this video goes live, the fantastic Pete Dunne was randomly renamed Butch, though the most infamous example has to be with the tag team of War Machine. When they first came to WWE, they were renamed the War Raiders. This was during their time in WWE's developmental brand NXT. When they came to the main show, however, they were given the god-awful name of the Viking Experience. Yeah, I'm not making that up. This was lambasted so much that the very next week they were renamed the Viking Raiders. Many could argue that they haven't really recovered from that. These name changes are often done with little to no explanation. In any other work of fiction, which wrestling fundamentally is, this would be extremely weird. Imagine if in one episode of Breaking Bad, Walter White is just called Steven Bricks with no explanation and everyone just goes along with it. That's pretty much what happens in WWE. Wrestling is fundamentally bizarre and weird, and it gets even stranger when run by a 70-something-year-old man. That weirdness can manifest itself more often than not in the words, names, and language used in the industry. So if it is so weird, why does so many people, myself included, love it so much? Well, if you can see past all those weird words and names, what you will find when done right, is some of the greatest storytelling, characters, and feats of strength athleticism you will ever see. Despite its downfalls, wrestling really is the best. Like I said, go watch WrestleMania 17 or something. This video topic was suggested by Robert Griffith over on my Patreon. Every Wednesday, I put up a video request post over on my Patreon for awesome patrons to leave video ideas on. I then pick one of those ideas to be turned into a video the following Wednesday. So if you have a great idea for a Name Explain video and wish to enjoy Name Explain videos ad-free as well as get exclusive content, then why not support the channel on Patreon? It takes just $1 a month to help the channel in a huge way and gets you all these amazing benefits. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, and the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos. $2 a month gets you all that, plus your name here with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.